I manage a police station in Reykjavik, Iceland, and last winter, an American walked in demanding we arrest his Airbnb host. He'd been there 2 days and insisted she was running an illegal operation because she kept leaving her front door unlocked. He wanted her charged with reckless endangerment of guests. I explained that in Iceland, most people don't lock their doors, it's normal here. Crime's extremely low. He got louder, said he'd studied international security protocols and that unlocked doors violate basic safety standards everywhere. I'd tried showing me a screenshot from some American home security blog. My colleague asked if anything was actually stolen. That's not the point, he said. She's creating a dangerous environment. He demanded to speak to someone who understands liability law. I told him I'm the station chief. We're not arresting anyone for trusting their neighbors. He left threatening to contact the U.S. Embassy about Iceland's negligent security culture. My cousin works hotel reception in Osaka, and she had an American couple refuse to stay in their room because it was too small to be legal. They measured it with a phone app, announced it was 18 square meters, and said that violates international hotel minimum space requirements. They wanted a full refund plus compensation for the deception, my cousin explained. That 18 square meters is standard for Japanese business. Hotel space is limited in Osaka. Rooms are designed efficiently. The wife said she's read the Geneva Convention on Accommodation Standards, and this violates basic human dignity codes. They demanded she call the city housing authority to report the hotel. When my cousin said there's no such violation, the husband accused her of covering for corporate exploitation. They posted a 1-star review claiming the hotel ignores international safety laws before checking out in Amsterdam. I work a bike rental shop near Central Station, and an American demanded we give him proper safety equipment before he'd take a bike. He meant a helmet. I told him helmets aren't required here, most Dutch people don't wear them. Cycling infrastructure is very safe. He said that's statistically impossible because he'd researched EU transportation mandates that require helmets on all bicycles. He refused to believe me, insisted I was withholding legally required safety gear to cut costs. He wanted documentation proving helmets aren't mandatory. When I showed him the actual Dutch traffic laws on my phone, he said the translation must be wrong. Every developed country requires helmets, he announced. It's in the UN Road Safety Charter. He demanded a refund. Said he'd report us for deliberately endangering tourists. He rented from another shop an hour later and came back asking why everyone's breaking the law. I teach high school in Stuttgart, Germany, and during a student exchange program. The American host teacher kept interrupting my lessons to correct my pedagogical violations. In Germany, students address teachers formally and stay seated unless asked to move. She told my students they could call me by my first name because that's how respectful modern education works, and encouraged them to get up and collaborate freely during my lecture. When I asked her to stop, she said she's certified in international teaching standards and I was creating an authoritarian environment. She tried explaining to my principal that German classroom formality violates UNESCO education equity principles. She'd apparently brought printed copies of some American teaching framework, kept referencing research-based best practices that require student-centered informal dynamics. My principal told her German schools follow German education law, not American trends. She spent the rest of the exchange writing a report on how our system suppresses student agency. My brother manages a funeral home in Manila, Philippines, and an American family tried to report us for mishandling remains because we displayed their grandmother's body in an open casket at the wake. In the Philippines, wakes often last several days, with the deceased present's traditional families stay with the body. The son said this violates international dignified burial protocols. And we should have immediately refrigerated and sealed the casket. He claimed we're disrespecting the deceased by allowing viewings. My brother explained this is how Filipino Catholic wakes work. The family specifically requested it. The American said he's researched WHO guidelines on body preservation, and this practice spreads biohazards. He wanted us shut down, threatened to contact the health department about our medieval customs. He tried demanding we close the casket immediately. When we didn't, he claimed we were violating international human remains treatment conventions. The rest of his family, who actually lived in Manila, had to explain that their grandmother wanted a traditional wake. I work customs at Doha Airport in Qatar. And an American businessman reported our security team, because we have separate processing lines for men and women at certain checkpoints. He said this violates international anti-discrimination treaties and we're enforcing illegal gender segregation. I explained that in Qatar, gender-separated spaces are common in various contexts for cultural and religious reasons, and processing still happens efficiently. He said he'd studied international airport standards and gender-based line separation directly contradicts ICAO equality regulations. Demanded to speak to someone from international oversight. When my supervisor came, the man tried explaining that our system breaches on anti-discrimination charters. He wanted documentation that we're exempt from international law. My supervisor told him to choose whichever line he's comfortable with and proceed. He went through, then tried reporting us to some international aviation body online. My sister runs a clinic in Copenhagen, Denmark, and an American patient demanded we provide mandatory supervision because our doctor left him alone in the examination room for 5 minutes. He claimed this violates patient safety protocols and that doctors must maintain constant visual contact during appointments. In Denmark, it's normal for doctors to step out briefly while patients prepare for exams. He said he's familiar with international medical standards and being left unsupervised constitutes medical negligence. He wanted the doctor's license number 2. File a formal complaint with the European Medical Board. My sister explained there's no such board, and brief privacy during appointments is standard everywhere. He insisted that ISO medical facility certifications require continuous monitoring. He refused to continue the appointment until she provided written safety guarantees. He eventually left, then sent an email threatening legal action for abandonment of care under international health law. I own a restaurant in Lyon, France, and an American couple tried to get us fined because we don't provide free tap water automatically. In France, you typically order bottled water with meals tap waters available if requested, but it's not placed on tables by default. They said this violates mandatory hydration access laws and that all restaurants must provide complimentary drinking water under international health codes. They demanded to see our permits, claimed we're exploiting customers by withholding a basic human right. I brought them tap water when they asked, but they wanted proof that charging for bottled water is legal. The husband said he'd researched EU consumer protection standards that require free water. He tried showing other diners some article on his phone about restaurant transparency requirements. When I explained French dining customs, he said, customs don't override legally mandated health access. They left a review saying, we operate in violation of international food service regulations. My uncle manages a market stall in Marrakesh, Morocco, and an American tourist reported him to city officials for false advertising because he didn't have price tags displayed. In Moroccan souk, prices are often negotiated. It's traditional part of the shopping culture. She said that international retail law requires clearly posted pricing to prevent consumer fraud. She'd apparently spent the morning photographing stalls without price tags. Said she was documenting systematic violations. My uncle explained that haggling is how souk work. She's welcome to negotiate or walk away. She claimed this violates WTO fair trade transparency standards and that Morocco must comply with international commerce regulations. She tried getting other tourists to sign a complaint. When the city official arrived, she demanded they enforce mandatory pricing disclosure laws. The official told her souk are traditional markets, not subject to fixed-price retail rules. She left, insisting Morocco's ignoring its international trade obligations. I worked the counter at a cafe in Melbourne, Australia, and an American demanded a refund because we charge extra for alternative milk. He said this discriminates against people with dietary restrictions and violates international accessibility pricing laws. In Australia, upcharges for soy, oat, or almond milk are standard. It costs more, so cafes charge more. He claimed he'd researched anti-discrimination food service codes that prohibit charging extra for medically necessary substitutions. He wanted to see our business license. Said we're illegally penalizing customers with lactose intolerance. I explained it's not a penalty. It's a cost difference. Every cafe in Melbourne does this. He said that doesn't make it legal. Insisted unfood equity guidelines, ban differential pricing for dietary needs. He tried calling the local council to report us. When they didn't answer, posted online that Australian cafes openly violate international disability accommodation standards. My cousin works at a bakery in Vienna, Austria, and an American tourist tried to get us closed because we don't offer gluten-free options. She said this violates mandatory allergen accommodation laws and that all food establishments must provide safe alternatives under international health codes. In Vienna, traditional bakeries focus on classic pastries. Some offer gluten-free items. Many don't. She claims she'd studied EU food safety directives that require gluten-free availability in all commercial bakeries. She demanded we produce compliance documentation. My cousin explained, "We're a small traditional bakery. We specialize in Viennese pastries. There are gluten-free bakeries nearby." She said specialization doesn't exempt us from legal allergen requirements because she tried contacting the health department. Insisted we're endangering celiac customers by refusing accommodation. She wanted our license revoked. The inspector who eventually came told her there's no law requiring every bakery to offer gluten-free products. She left claiming Austria's behind on international food safety enforcement. I drive a taxi in Dublin, Ireland. An American passenger tried to report me for reckless driving because I drove on the left side of the road. She screamed from the back seat that I'm going the wrong way and needed to pull over immediately. I explained that in Ireland, like the UK, we drive on the left. It's legal. It's how all traffic moves here. She said she'd researched international driving standards and that modern countries use right side traffic for safety. She claimed left side driving violates updated on-road conventions and that Ireland must have outdated infrastructure. She demanded I switch lanes. Said I'm breaking traffic law when I stayed in the left lane. She tried calling the Gardaí to report an unsafe driver ignoring international regulations. She genuinely believed I was driving illegally. When we arrived at her hotel, she refused to pay. Said she won't reward criminal behavior. Hotel staff had to explain that Irish traffic laws are different from American ones. She left insisting Ireland needs to modernize its road system. My father works the ticket counter at a train station in Zurich, Switzerland. And an American tried to get him fired because our announcements aren't legally bilingual. She'd heard announcements in German, French, and Italian. Switzerland's 3 main languages, and said we must include English under international transportation accessibility laws. She claimed that global transit standards require English announcements in all major stations. My father explained that Switzerland's official languages are German, French, Italian, and Romance. English isn't one of them. She said that's non-compliant with international tourism regulations, and that English is mandatory in EU transportation hubs. When he mentioned Switzerland isn't in the EU, she said that doesn't matter because international travel standards apply. Universally, she demanded to speak to management about our discriminatory language policy. She wanted documentation proving we're exempt from English requirements. She eventually left, then emailed, claiming Swiss Railways violates international passenger information laws. I work at a ferry terminal in Helsinki, Finland, and an American family missed their boat and demanded we hold the ferry for late passengers as required by law. The ferry was already gone, next one in 4 hours. They said international maritime passenger codes require ferries to wait 15 minutes past departure for delayed travelers. I explained that ferries run on fixed schedules. If you're late, you take the next one. The father insisted he'd researched marine transportation regulations and that commercial ferries must accommodate reasonable delays under international standards. He wanted us to radio the ferry and order it back. When I said that's impossible, he claimed we're violating mandatory passenger assistance protocols. He tried showing me some cruise ship passenger rights document he'd found online, said it proves ferries must wait. I told him cruise ships and scheduled ferries operate differently. He demanded a refund for failure to provide legally required accommodation. Spent an hour trying to contact maritime authorities to report our non-compliant departure policies. Manage a post office in Auckland, New Zealand. And an American tried to get our postal service investigated because we don't deliver mail on Saturdays anymore. He'd been waiting for a package and said eliminating Saturday. Delivery violates international postal service obligations. In New Zealand, regular mail delivery shifted to weekdays only a few years. The Go parcels still get delivered Saturdays through courier services, but Standard Post doesn't. He claimed he'd researched Universal Postal Union regulations that mandate 6-day delivery in all member countries. He wanted proof that New Zealand has legal exemption from international postal standards. I explained that postal services set their own delivery schedules based on efficiency and demand. He said that's non-compliant with binding international agreements, and that cutting Saturday service breaches postal treaty obligations. Tried contacting the Ministry of Business to report us for violating international postal law. Genuinely believed there's a global rule requiring Saturday mail. When he finally got his package on Monday, he filed an online complaint claiming New Zealand Post ignores its international commitments. I work border control in Singapore, and an American arrived convinced that our ban on chewing gum is unenforceable under international trade law. He'd brought several packs to test the policy, said that WTO free trade agreements mean we can't restrict personal consumer goods. I explained that chewing gum's banned in Singapore except for dental medical purposes. It's been law since 1992. He said he'd consulted international commerce regulations, and our law violates free movement of goods principles. He wanted to speak to supervisor about our non-compliant import restrictions. When my supervisor arrived, he tried arguing that personal use quantities are protected under international consumer rights conventions. We confiscated the gum. He left insisting he'd report Singapore for breaching international trade obligations. I've noticed Americans arrive everywhere assuming their home rules are international law. They'll cite global standards that don't exist, reference treaties they've misunderstood, and insist local customs violate international regulations. They genuinely believe the world signed some agreement to operate exactly like the United States. It's exhausting explaining that international doesn't mean American, that most countries have their own laws and cultural practices that don't require validation from foreign tourists. They leave convinced we're all just behind on enforcement.